Hello to those that are here. I'm just getting my coffee up here live in a second. Hey. All right. Welcome. I am your host, Glabe. So, if you're just joining us, then welcome. Cheers. This is Breaking the Monolith. Now, the idea here is that there are a lot of developers out there looking to learn code. And there's a lot of talk about breaking monolithic programs down and don't do monolithic programs, go with a microservice architecture. Well, I'm here to break that down. I've got two monolithic applications that I developed over the course of 3 years, and they are now to the point that I cannot simply maintain them, upkeep them, and it's becoming quite the hassle. I have two other developers that work with me, so now adds a little extra complexity to that. And so, to keep things simple, keep things on par, and keep the ball moving, I decided to tackle the tackle the job of breaking down my backend into microservices, as well as breaking down my front end or my game server into some microservices. Um, the idea here is to simplify the process so that when we have multiple developers working on this one project, it's going to be easier for us to maintain, it's going to be easier for us to handle. We are going to keep this up, and if you've been following with me from the beginning of this, then thank you. I appreciate your time. Um, as you know, we've broken down quite a bit of our backend services. There is only, I believe, one or two more services that we need to break down. Um, if you're joining with me fresh, well, you're in for a treat. If you want to backlog, there is a cluster of videos in this that are, I think we're on number 10 today, and for the most part, they're between an hour to 2 hours long. So looking at like 18-ish hours of video. Um, and so far, we've broken down the monolithic backend. We've broken it so far into 8 services, ranging from the website to the player services to the item services to world services, login services, launcher services, as well as Discord bot and Discord services. Um, we still have an economy service to build, um, which is going to be taking place of things like trading, um, keeping track of items that are being traded, added to the economy, removed from the economy, items that are being traded through means of trade post, so that we can truly reflect the. So the idea is that we want to truly reflect the economy as a player-driven economy. So all of our items in the game have a base value. Uh, from there, everything is based on what players are selling and trading it for. Now, in today's video, we're going to be tackling a little bit more of the Discord alerts. There was a couple of things that I didn't pull in, which one of my neat little features that seems to have caught in a bit of trend is that my players can send a PM from one player to the other player in game. But now, if you've ever been in playing RuneScape and like you've typed out a message and it was fairly lengthy, and then all of a sudden, boom, the person that you sent the message to logged off, and you hit enter, and it's boom, can't send this message because player's no longer online. Yeah, fuck that. That really annoyed me. I've done that a few times, and it really annoyed me. So now I wrote a way that um, if you create an account in my game, you can link your your Discord account to my game server, and doing that allows you to send a PM or a private message that would have otherwise been going nowhere to the person in Discord, and they will get they'll get a direct message from my bot, and with a little button where they can click to reply, and it'll bring up a form model input where they'll be able to type out a reply, hit send, and it will shoot that back to the original person who sent that in game. Um, so it's kind of like a way that you can message from in-game to Discord and vice versa, as opposed to just messaging in-game. So didn't I didn't pull that code in any of the previous videos, but we're gonna pull that code in this video. I already started it a little bit before this video. I'll run over that code quickly so that we can kind of have a look at that. Let's actually do that right now. Let's get rid of my nug, bring it up over here. There's that. Just boom, my back. There I am. All right. So over here in the ethically backend, this is the monolithic program. And for those of you that don't know what a monolithic program is, it is more or less a giant one-size-fits-all program. It's a program that if you need to make a small change to it, you got to bring the whole mountain down just to change something. So right now we've broken down majority of these. There's only a couple of little things we have left to break down. Again, this would just be mainly to do with the economy, with the markets. There's a couple of sales data that we need to trade post services that we need to sort of export into our newly designed microservice. And we also have some economy, a few economy listings to pick up. These are just to do with my trade post, because basically people can go to a specific trade post and they can sell, buy, trade items, whether they're online, offline, right there or not. It's kind of like they can have their own store. And they'll be able to sell shit. So next, you'll also see it in here, there's a way for this message. This is just a way for a user to receive a message. So this is where my game server would make a post saying, hey, I've got this message, and my handler would be like, all right, well, is it null? No? Okay. We'll try to get the member for the recipient of that message. If this member is null, then we're just going to return that there was no Discord recipient found, and that would be the message that the player would get in game, saying sorry, there was no Discord recipient found. Otherwise, if there is a Discord recipient, then we're going to build an embed message with a couple of fields. We're going to title this with Boneyard Messenger. Its title says offline message because it's clearly an offline message. And you received the message while you were offline, and we're going to stick the message inside the description of the embed message. So essentially people will get this neat little embed message about receiving a direct message. And then we're going to stick a button on there, which is going to be a simple reply. And we're going to concatenate the uh, sender's name, as well as we're going to do I'm going to stick a pipe in there so that we can split it. And then we're going to stick the recipient's name on there. So now we have a button whose label, or whose, not label, but the ID or the key, because you can't pass too much information around, so I kind of came up with this way of passing it here. And this is all done, this is all handled now on our smoother system. However, it again builds the embed message, titles it, and what we're doing with the button reply is that we're gonna say that it's starting with 2 underscores, and that's only because, well, honestly, I shouldn't be using 2 underscores. If anything, I should be using something that is potentially not gonna show up in a character's username. Now, people can use 2 spaces in a username. Be like II space space PK II, or PK space space II, for example. Somebody wants to use 2 spaces in there, that's going to screw me up. This is not something that I came across, but it was something that I thought about post development. So I sort of dropped the ball in that sense, because again, I'm taking the reply and I'm sticking two underscores on it. However, then I'm going to concatenate the sender's username, replacing any spaces with underscores, and then I'm going to concatenate a pipe, because the pipe cannot be used in a player's name. So that's the perfect place to split sender and the receiver. So now I know that I can sort of break this down when it comes to that need. So now if we were to come into our listeners, because we are going to have to create a new listener for this, because this is a button. So now we need a way to listen for a button that gets pressed when our Discord user presses it. And this is going to be copy-paste code, but we're going to be sort of cleaning it up as we go. So right now, if we jump back into our backend, up into our Discord bots, into our listeners, there is a button listener. We're just going to go ahead and copy this. Probably regret this, but we're going to paste it in as is, naming it button listener. And yes, we are instantly going to regret this. So I instantly regret this. And it seems like we have this one from our... Okay, perfect. Okay, that's good. So we need the datagram network. We need the model from Discord, Discord.jda. We'll take our logger from our... Good. See, we're not using the shared anymore. Shared is gone, so I don't want to go clicking on that. However, I do have loggers down here in the utility, which makes me also wonder what datagram packet that took. Okay, no, that's the right one. But we are going to have to grab this. Okay, I'm just a little confused there on why that's picking up that, but not picking up this. See, I did some other maneuvers around here as well, because the fact that um, the it was relying on too many shared networks, and that's not a right one. Okay, so we're gonna get rid of that. Logger can be pulled in. Discord network. Where am I pulling that one from? Should be pulling that one. Get Discord user. Discord. Set action row. So what we're doing there with the whole set action row is we're just making sure that it's going to be an empty row. And I'm just sort of tidying up the code a little bit so that it looks a little more friendly. So really I only need this, or at least it only thinks it needs that, for accepting a quest. So we're gonna rewrite that when the time comes. Because for now, I just want to make sure that this here gets working. So let's nothing worse than spilled coffee. What a waste. Alright, so looking in here, we got to change a couple of things just because we want to rearrange how we're passing this little message around. Because like I said, in here, using the double underscore can lead to some issues. And to avoid those issues, I'm actually going to just use a pound sign. We're just going to use the little hashtag, pound, whatever the hell you want to call it. Depends on which era you grew up in. It's a pound, it's a hash, it's a tic-tac-toe board. Let's go back into the listener, and we're going to change this, and we're going to change this. And we're just going to make those both into the pound symbol, so that we're going to be properly formatting this. And for those of you that are interested in what I just did, how I was able to highlight those two separate areas, IntelliJ has this great little feature where you can press Control, Shift, Alt, and you can click into as many places as you want, highlight as much as you want. It puts the caret in all of those locations, and you can literally start typing, and it types out exactly where you have highlighted. It's a great feature. I personally love it. The other thing you can do is it just allows you to do quick edits on multiple lines and multiple areas, such as getting rid of those and changing them into a hashtag or a pound sign. If you happen to want to learn about some hotkeys or some ways to quickly navigate through stuff, by all means, give me a thumbs up. Let me know. Give me a not a thumbs up. Well, give me a thumbs up. But drop me a message, comment, something. Let me know that you want to that you'd like to see something, a video, or like say some tips, some tricks, and maybe you want to see some basics. By all means, like I'm all for creating some basics. I mean, I know a lot of my videos are a little more advanced, a little more intermediate than some of the basic videos that are out there. But if you like my teaching style, by all means, let me know you want some basic knowledge, and I will make that happen. So let's this series is not about teaching you how to create stuff. It's more about teaching you how to break down architecture. If you happen to see anything in here that you're interested in throughout this video, by all means, let me know that you'd like to know a little bit more about how I created it. And I'll by all means do a little video on it. Like, for example, on the whole navigating between slash commands to form models to buttons to how to handle and integrate between Discord bots. Let me know you wanted to see that, and I will make it happen. I've done great things with bots. I even have an RPG game that is a bot, um, which will be releasing in 2024 at some point. However, jumping back to the alert controller, so we're creating the button, calling it with the identifier of reply DM, and again sticking the username and the recipient, and it's the sender and the recipient, and then we're just going to simply tag reply, which is what the button is going to say on it. So then we're going to take the Discord user that we have, we're going to get the user account from that Discord member, because a Discord member and a Discord user are two different things. A member is technically a user that is a part of a guild, where a user is your solid user self, like you as a person. That is a user. A member is just simply a user that is a part of a group or part of a guild. So we're going to take the member, we're going to grab the user, and then we're going to open up a private channel, and we're going to queue up a message for said private channel. We're going to queue up inside this channel, and we're going to say that we want to send a message embed, which is going to consist of the embed that we have already built, and we're going to tell it to build. And then we're going to say set the action row. The action row is the thing that comes up beneath the embed message. So like your select models, your buttons, your emojis, all of those things are part of an action row. So then we're adding a button to our action row, and we're going to queue that message up to be sent. And that is how we send a private message to a user. And then we reply back with message sent, all good, and we continue on as we were. Now, the user then has this button that they can handle. So now into our button listener, and just to point this out before anybody says anything, yes, this is piss-poor. I should be putting this into a button class and extracting the actual logic here, just saying if this is his, then new button, like I should be saying new reply button dot handle action, and then take care of all this inside of another class, because like, let's face it, that's how I should be doing this to be more object oriented. I did just copy this over, so let's go ahead and do that. Actually, you know what? Let's stick with object oriented. Let's not go outside, because that's what led to this spaghetti code in the first place. Was it, not gonna lie? I was like, hey, I'm gonna stick this here. I'm gonna do this, and I'm just gonna tack shit on. And I did it because I was in a rush. That I can't push that. If you're a developer and you're looking to get clean code and you're looking to write good code and you're looking to write good quality code and learn to do it, don't rush. Don't rush it. Senior to junior, don't rush it. Take your time, get it right, learn from it so that you know what you wrote. Also, so that if you plan, even if you don't plan to have anybody else on the project with you, I originally, when I wrote this, had no intentions on letting anybody ever join me on this journey, and like I was planning on doing this thing wholeheartedly myself. And let me tell you, 2 years in, I was praying to have a developer with me, to have somebody that can help me, because it started small, and then it sort of snowballed, and then that snowball sort of avalanched, and that was when it got out of control for me. And then I started to rush code, and then I started to stack code on top of code, and that was when I began to feel the need that my players and my people were looking to get more frequent updates rather than trying to take my time to just write for me. Because when I first started this project, it was purely just a self project. I just wanted to do this because, um, because quite frankly, when I got into the private server scene way back in 2007, I was fascinated because I absolutely loved playing video games. I was that weird child that sat in his room for 18 hours a day and played video games. Played all sorts of console games, PlayStation, Sega, Nintendo, Super Nintendo. I grew up playing like Castlevania and all sorts of different games, and I fell in love with RuneScape when I was probably, I don't know, 15, 16, somewhere around there, I don't know. I fell in love with it a long, long time ago, and I already had a passion for Java. So when I found out that there was a private server scene that allowed me to not only play the game that I loved, but develop the game that I loved and do it in a language that I loved, pretty much, I pretty much fell in love with the whole thing. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the chat. Got two people in chat already talking. Great, love it. Welcome. And after I got into the private server scene, back in 2007, um, I saw all these other developers writing these pretty cool things, and I was like, dude, I totally want to be that guy one day. I want to write this stuff. I want to be that good. And so I tried to learn the RuneScape protocol and tried to learn it, but it was all way the hell over my head at the time. Like when I first came into it, I was looking at like the network protocols and the bit shifting and how this and that was going, and it all just it blew my mind at that time. At that time, I was too inexperienced, too like I knew sort of what was going on. Like I knew what bit shifting was. I knew that this and that. And I knew like how the network protocols were going, but I didn't feel confident enough that I could tackle it. So I stuck around in the private server scene for years and years. Fuck, decade and a half now, 15 years or so. I don't know. Been there for a while, but um, I've watched these people develop frameworks and do new frameworks and all these and dance, and I was like, I want to do that someday. So back in 2018, so here it is, like 11 years later, I decided to come back to the private server scene, and I started playing with these Valius sources and Project 51 and all these other 317s that were spaghetti coded into this, that, and the other thing that were then spaghetti coded into OSRS data and all this other stuff. And it became very hectic to try to um, update and maintain because let's face it, every private server is itself a monolithic program. And if you look at the game servers, they're usually a nightmare to try to update and maintain, and they're usually not designed very well. Um, and so I was getting super frustrated trying to do simple things, but yet at the same time, I was already writing a tool or picking at tools that could edit the cache. So in late 2019, I started uh, this, and I began trying to write my own tools to read the cache and have an understanding of the protocol so that I could one day fill that childhood dream of myself of writing my own server from scratch. And so after doing a lot of trial and errors and a whole lot of that, it doesn't work, it doesn't work, it works, why does it work moments, um, I eventually got my myself to read the cache. And at that point, I was like, okay, now I need to view what I'm doing. So in 2020, I started up a game server so that I could connect a client, so that I could use that client to view cache stuff that I was doing, which sort of spiraled and led to me making a private server. It led to me then making a very shitty login server. People could connect. I had an Australian dude that was coming on daily, while because I would program all day, and he was conveniently a few hours off of me, enough that when I passed out a wrong day of code, he was there to go in and break my code, leave me messages, and I'd come back and fix it the next day. And it went on like that for a while, for about a year. I got pretty confident. I grew in my skills. I added in, well, I created a kind of a unique network in the back end in the process, and then I expanded that, and I made it into a separate part. I kind of expanded it into a Spring Boot application, and that was going to be my back end. And then it became larger and larger and larger, and then I had two gigantic monolithic programs now that I understood. But my project got so big that I couldn't be as a single developer anymore. So I brought on two other guys, one of which decided he wanted to go his other way, and so he fell off. And then I brought on a third developer, and I started to realize that if I bring in other developers into this project, they're not going to know my thought process. Like my project is too large and complex to just bring people in and be like, all right, you know Java, you can jump in, you can do this, go. So I then have to spend a whole lot of time training them on all this complexity that I had and all this this spaghetti code, basically. So when I was doing these YouTube series, I actually had a viewer ask me if I could do an example of a monolithic program into a microservice program, but in a real world sort of situation, not something that's like Hello World or Landon Hotel or like those stereotypical things you find on YouTube that are all about, we're going to build a mock-up sort of thing and then we're going to talk about it. So I decided, you know what? I've got these two giant monolithic programs. I eventually have to bite the bullet, and I eventually have to break these down into microservices. So I thought, you know what? If it's going to benefit me and it's going to benefit one of my viewers, I decided, hell, let's do it. Let's go with this, and I'm going to run with breaking down my monolithic programs on video. So that's what led me to do this live stream, and now I'm basically trying to only code this while I'm on live, just so that I can give people the full process, the full thought process, and all this. But like, I've been having a hell of a lot of fun with this. I definitely encourage you to one day watch them all, dude. Like, not just saying that to get me views, but like, in all honesty, like, I've been trying to make it so that people can bridge the gap of developments, because I know myself, I'm a self-taught developer. I never had secondary education. I never went to college. I never took a computer course in school. I'm 100% self-taught. I didn't even have computer courses for the majority of my schooling. It wasn't until I think junior high that we had a computer class, but like the computer tech that was teaching the class didn't even know how to take a screenshot of this desktop. So it wasn't really, I didn't really have any kind of good education about it. But like, I'm 100% self-taught over 20 years. I got into this back in 2001, is when I first got into scripting and writing batch codes, and like doing little Python scripts. And then I found out about Java and I got into that. I sort of spiraled my self-taught knowledge. I'm an avid learner. Like, I'm constantly looking to better myself. I don't compare myself to anybody. I only ever compare myself and my code to myself yesterday, so that I can try to better myself as a developer tomorrow. Um, and I do so because I want to challenge myself, and it is kind of the thing that drove me as a self-learner. So whenever I've had these questions of how does something work, or does this work, or what happens if I poke the bear, um, I never had that mentor or that person to talk to ask questions about, so I just pretty much decided to just take the sharp stick and poke the bear, see what happens, tuck my tail and run. Or maybe it's a win. Um, I've I'm a huge avid person, like code developer. I love to develop code. I love to learn. I love to share knowledge. Like, that's the whole reason behind this whole YouTube channel, is that I want to be able to share knowledge. Um, and I'm getting a little sidetracked here. But if there's ever anything that you guys want to learn specifically, like, just let me know, because right now I'm kind of just running. Um, if you want to know like some basics and get to understand the basics of Java, like right down to, if you want to understand like how the memory in Java works, if you want to understand what an integer is, if you want to understand what object-oriented programming means, if there's any of the basics that you guys want to know, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to make a video, maybe do a live stream, like chit chat with you, break it down. Like, by all means, you can reach out to me here, Discord. I've got Discord in my description. I've got a community where you can message me basically 24/7. You can message other people, other developers in the community. I'm trying to start a sort of a friendly community for developers to go to be able to reach out for help and ask sort of advanced, intermediate, basic questions. Like, if, like, yeah, if there's anything, I don't want to go too off topic here right now, but let's jump back to cleaning up this, because this here is not object-oriented programming. This here is gross, because this is a button listener. All it should be listening, all it should be doing is listening for click actions, and then delegating those actions off to their actual object. So we are going to first start out by making another package, and we're just going to call this btn for button, and I'm just going to say dot implementation, or implement, for implementations. Now, a lot of us developers use the IMPL for implementations in packaging, so that you'll see that this is going to be a, and I might even just drop this button listener up here, refactor it, so that now I have listeners, a button listener. This will be my buttons. This is the button listener. And I'm going to have implementations of buttons in here. So we're going to go ahead and make a new class, and we're just going to call this reply em button, I guess. Naming is very hard. You don't necessarily have to make something like ridiculously long, but like at the same time, when you're coming, naming is one of the, to me, naming is the hardest part of programming. Like, I can write code all day, it's not a problem. I can come up with system design, not a problem. Naming things is the hardest part, at least for me, because you want to name it so that it's somewhat descriptive, but at the same time, you don't want to focus all your time on making some sort of, like, you don't want to name it like method. That's why there's documents. You want a quick, somewhat of a quick name for it that somewhat describes it, and then you want to write up some Java doc that more or less fully describes it. Whereas, yeah, I'm just getting ahead of myself. But anyway, we're going to make a new class here. We're going to call it reply DM button. We're going to add that. I'm going to come back into here. And because here we're just looking to see if the button, if the clicked button, because up here we're getting about a copy of the button based on the event. So we're taking the event button, and of course, if the button happens to be null ID, then we're just going to throw an error saying that it was a null. But other than that, we're logging to the console that a button was clicked. This isn't something that necessarily needs to be done. I was just doing it during development times just so that it would help me see what was pressed. So then we come down here and say if the button ID starts with reply DM, we then want to take all of this code and we more or less I'm gonna create a new Java class. This one's gonna be an interface, and this one is going to be button action. Now, what I'm doing here is we're gonna come down here, and this is gonna have a void method that is just going to be sure perform action or handle action maybe, because we're handling the action that has been clicked. Handle button action. Now we need to come back into our button listener because we're going to take this event and we're going to stick that in here. Now we're going to go back into our button reply, and this is going to implement our button action. And because we wrote a method in there, a void method, that is that needs to be implemented. So we come into here and we're going to implement this, and here is where we are going to paste in the previous code that we had, which is the clicked button. We'll import a couple of these just to get them imported. All right, back into here. We're just going to take this for redundancy, just to make sure that nothing is broken, so that it's just more or less kind of like security where you're passing things along just for redundancy's sake. So in here, we're just going to simply make a button, click button. We're going to be grabbing that data from the reply. We're going to take the click button. We're going to replace the text that we started with, and then we're going to trim it so that it gets rid of any trailing or like white spaces. And the reason we're doing that is so that we can get the clean sender receiver. And now in here, we are asking the user to give us a reply. So here is a text input, and we're creating it. It's going to have the ID of reply so that we can figure out where the hell it's coming from. And then we're going to say just enter your reply. We're going to tell it that it's going to be a short text input. So that just means it's going to be just one line text. And it's going to be somewhere between 1 character and 100 characters. So we're not looking to get this huge message, but we're looking to get at least a message. And then we're going to build a model. This here is so that we can stick that request into this little model form that's going to pop up. So it's going to be a pop-up after they do they click on the button. They're going to get a pop-up saying, okay, enter your reply here, and they'll get a line where they can fill it out, like kind of like just a text line they can fill it out with, and then they're going to get a submit button. Once they hit that submit button, that's going to then submit it, and then we got to go handle form model input. So now that we have buttons up here, and we do have to actually add this this button listener, I believe, has to get added to our, yes. So we have to add the new button listener in here. This is so that our because in here we add listeners. This is just kind of a high level thing. We add listeners in here, and these will sit and Discord will listen for these actions and trigger. So if there's a Discord action, it listens for these overrides because they listener adapter, very similar to how we just made our own little interface. And it now, okay, so now if this starts with here, we're going to say new reply DM button dot handle button action, and just pass in the event. Simple like that. Now this is a little more object oriented like because this object is only listening for button interactions. And when it gets an interaction, it does a quick check and then it delegates the action off to its appropriate handler. So a reply button simply has to handle what the so a reply button this defines what no and this is totally going off topic here, but just object oriented. A reply button, this defines what a reply button is. We could define it with some variables if we wanted to, but we don't. And then we have actions or methods. These methods are basically what can be done with said object. So here in this case, we can handle a button action with this. And then we define all those actions in here. You can have public, you can have private. Those are just simply whether or not the method can be seen from a different file or different package. Again, I can go into videos about this and describe what public means, what private means, what protected means, what these return type means, what the static keyword means, final. I can go through and describe all that for you. Just let me know you want it, and I will make it happen. So down here, we're creating a model, a form model, and we're giving it the ID of reply message underscore. And again, I'm gonna change this to be the pound symbol, simply because the data that we're clicking is going to be consistent of the remainder of the it's going to be the remaining part of the string. So it's going to be the sender, or the sender, type, recipient, and so we're looking to we're looking to concat that on. So we're saying that this one's going to be a reply message. We're going to stick on the ID of the message, and then we're going to pipe it and stick on the rest of it. So that way when we come into our form model input, and again, this is not object oriented, this should be handled in the same way that we just did the other one. We should create a we should come into here and make a model and then make an IMPL, and again we should drop this guy into here, come up, make an interface here, and we're just going to call this what am I doing? Form model action, I guess. And this one here is just going to do the same thing. Void handle form submission. Because technically what they're doing is submitting a form. We're hitting the submit button and it comes into us. So then now we jump back into our form model listener, steal this event, come into here, drop it here, and that is our functional interface. A functional interface, and we can actually technically annotate this with a functional interface, which will lock that or like restrain that to only being able to take in the one action. And in fact, just for practice, we're going to do this here as well. Um, that just simply means that if I was to try to add another method into here, it's going to throw an error saying that you're not allowed. This is supposed to be a functional interface. And a functional interface versus an interface just means that it is a one-time function. There's only one thing that can be done in there, and that's it. So we're going to make a functional interface for the form model for the form model action, which is going to handle the form model submission. So now we're going to come back into our form model input, and we are basically going to copy all of this so that we can go into an implementation, write up a new Java class, and we're going to call this one direct message form. Yeah, sure, direct message form. Add that in, implements form model action, implement the unhandled method, and then we're going to drop in our all right. So we are first off, we're going to grab the so we're going to grab the form for the model. We're going to then take that and we're going to split it up. This would be the spot where we're going to then defer a message, or actually, no, we'll defer the message there. So now the message ID, we're splitting it at the first pipe. The person that we're sending it to gets split at the second. The user that's receiving it gets split at the third. And the message reply is the event get values, which would be the model mapping, or like the thing that we stuck inside of the, because essentially there's going to be a big form, and there's going to be a title on the form, and there's going to be a text input, and we're pulling that text input, which is the event value, and we're taking that out of the array so that we can get the value of it, getting the value of the 0, because it's the only one that's in there, so it's the first index, and then we want it as a string, and that's going to be the message that we now typed in and are sending to our person in game. And now we're going to have a formatted reply, which is just a datagram packet that I'm using to send to my game server at the moment, because my game server doesn't have Spring Boot in it, or Spring in it at all at the moment. So I'm building a way, or I used a datagram packet or datagram network to be able to send UDP packets back and forth. It's not exactly the best, but it was something that I did in a quick fix. Later on, we're actually going to upgrade our we're going to take some time and upgrade our Spring Boot backend to implement Spring's version of Netty, because my game server runs Netty in order to make communications with the endpoint user or the client. It uses Netty to package up, encrypt, and do all the transactions. So Spring actually has its own networking libraries built in, and its own networking means of handling the networking within the Spring family. So we're actually going to utilize the Netty framework from Spring in a little while. Maybe not this video, but like one of our future videos. And we're actually then going to generate an actual connection between our game world and our backend services, so that we can have one service that's going to be able to tunnel messages back and forth to our game server, which will be something that will be very useful down the road. But in the meantime, we're just doing this sort of old school. and on just simply taking a paper plane and throwing a message, hoping it gets there. And again, it's going to go ahead and build a message uh, so that it can send a message to you, the Discord user, saying that it was sent, while it also is going to fire off a datagram network of a formatter. And I'll just show you the datagram network right quick, which apparently is not... yeah. Okay, well, I gotta fix a few things in there because it's pulling from, because I had this going from one thing and I had it, I did have a shared module, which is screwing me up right now, to be honest. But here's how we handle this. So now we come back into here, our form model listener, and we're just going to delegate this to the new, what do we call it? Direct message model dot handle submission and pass in the event. There. So now our listener is doing the only thing that it should do, and it is listening. When it receives an event, it's going to identify which event it is and then delegate it off to the appropriate handler. And that will take care of our interactions there for Discord. I believe that's it for Discords. Events, the messages, we got that sent, private sent, yeah, okay, Discord messages. Implement. Kingdom is something that I'm not too concerned with before release. A couple of lazy cats hanging out behind me. One in the window. One on here on the floor beside me. One on the chair behind me. And I got my wolf on the floor beside me as well. It's family day in the office. They're all here to code with me. Alright, so the other thing we have to do is trade post sales. We got to make a... we're going to have to copy over some of my services from the trade posting network so that we can build up a little bit there. So that would be under the economy. We're going to be looking to make new economy services. This is going to consist of trade post as well as, well, right now it's only going to consist of trade post because that's going to be the only economic thing that we're tracking at the moment. We're also going to include stores into this later on, and I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to break my stores off to their own microservice as well. I feel like I should, but at the same time, I feel like I'm going to wind up with... And don't let this ever be a deterrent for you, because, like, I've seen a lot of microservices where they have, like, 15, 20, 500 services running. And yes, that would be one jar file per service. Don't let that be a deterrent to you. If you ever think, like, oh, I want to do this, but that's making too much. No, it's not making too much. It's making it easier for you. It's helping to segment things and keep things separate, keep everything in its place, and everything has a place. Don't let the mindset of that's too much. Don't let that bog you down. It's never too much. It's never too much. It's never too late. It's never too anything. What is too much is piling everything into one monolithic application and then trying to handle it later. That is too much. Because it's just too much to handle. Microservices is pretty much where we're at with development these days. If you're a junior dev looking to um, get into development or looking to get into the field, by all means. If you're a Java developer, you're going to want to learn Spring. If you're a Kotlin developer, you're going to want to learn Ktor. It's basically the same thing, just tailored for the language. Uh, these are frameworks that allow you to build all sorts of API. Because let's face it, microservices are, for all intents and purposes, and don't quote me on this, but for all intents and purposes, they're single small Spring Boot applications, because they all essentially have their own little HTTP Tomcat server where they can make and receive HTTP requests, which are just a fancy way, or not really a fancy. Microservices are basically little networked applications that can make network calls. Not even network applications. They're just little applications that can make communications to other um, applications. Now, whether that be a network of Spring Boot applications that make HTTP requests, or whether it be something a little more sophisticated and secure, like a Netty network, where you have a whole bunch of packets and encoding that's going on and transferring back and forth. Those are essentially how microservices work. They're applications that make communications to other applications, and that is what essentially makes up a service. Sort of like you have a bunch of employees that make up the company. Um, Now, if you're going to stick around with me till right up until the production and release of my server, I am going to be getting this all onto a VPS at the end of this, and it will be put into a I do not. I'm not going to say it is, because I'm not really 100% of my time frame, but ultimately it's going to get put into a Docker image, or we're going to put these into Docker containers, so that we can orchestrate the services in a much neater way. Because right now in IntelliJ, I can organize these here in a very simple manner, and I can sort of start, reboot, change, and I can manage these very simple with the services tab. But um, once we get into more of a production mindset, we're going to be looking at getting this into a more. We're going to first set up a Docker container, and then we're going to be looking at some Kubernetes, so that we can truly take care of it. And there's been a lot of talk in the private server scene, or at least there's been a bit of talk about doing microservices and using things like Docker and all this other thing. And a lot of developers tell people that it's just too much. It's not worth it in the private server scene. It's overkill. But realistically, it's not. Let's face it. The private server scene is technically an illegal scene. Let's face it. However, that said, it's also a playground. People say things that are like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for the private server scene. It's not worth it for these type of applications. People say that it's just they are what they are, pretty much. They are sort of what they are. It's kind of a dying scene. But at the same time, it's also the perfect place to go crazy and test and just explore. Because what do you got to lose? You're already doing something in a shady scene. Just poke there. Be curious. Keep that coffee cup full. Be curious. Speaking of which, I have to make a quick run to fill up my coffee cup. If you guys want to fill up yours, by all means, I will be back in just a moment. Alright, I'm back. I've got my coffee cup filled up. Just changing colors again. Alright, so what do we got left on the table for today? We built our other Discord service so we can send direct messages back and forth to users. We pulled some of these messages. We do have to pull the offline sales, trade post listings, the trade post service. We are also going to then have to pull, double check everything, the trade post listing, the repository, which is just the database, economy, market. There is a trade post controller. I think that is it. Yes, I believe that's it for that. So, let's close all of this. So we're going to have to look at our trade post controller. Take a look at the trade post listing, the repository, the service, and then we have a couple of DTO objects. So, because we don't want to mess with the DTO objects, and this is generally how we're breaking these services down, is that we don't want to mess with the existing thing, because the existing thing exists. So, we're looking at our two little, we have a couple of different things that represent what a trading post listing is, what an offline sale is, and we have a service, we have our repository, we have an actual listing itself, which we'll just drag over here, the database, and the controller. So we have our controller where the requests come into. The controller then asks for the, generally when you're making it, and again, this is why we're redoing it, this one actually looks pretty clean. We have, well, I say clean, but let's talk about that later. The controller is sort of the entry point towards your application. So this is where requests come in, and then this handles the requests and delegates it to the service. The service is the thing that has access to the actual database layer, or the repositories, and this is where we handle interfacing with said database and returning back transfer objects or data transfer objects, DTO. These are just simply database objects that have database identifying information removed from them, as well as any sort of personal information removed from it, so that you're getting just basically the object that you need to handle with, or you need. Because let's face it, when you make a request to a database, you're going to get a DAO, or data access object, which is going to give you the raw data, or basically the raw POJO or the record from that database. Um, Now, that's going to give us all sorts of information that we don't necessarily want to pass along. Um, and the idea with database development, when you're building a database, you don't want to have one table with everything in it. You want to think about object-oriented programming. Uh, and this comes from 20 years experience. If you, for example, we'll talk a little bit about the gaming world. So if you have a player object, you're not going to store everything about that player into one database table. Um, you're going to have a table for the player's profile, which will consist of whatever information you consider profile. You'll have some information about the player's skill tree, about their different backpacks or their different inventories they have. You'll have different a different spot for like achievements and for things like collection logs, and these are all separate things that make up a player profile. So these are all different things that would make up a player's database. So these would be different things, like player profile might contain a key identifier that like, for example, I use a hash, a player's hash. I'll take the player's profile, I'll hash the name and a couple of other things like I'll generate a hash out of it, and that'll be the thing that I identify with. So if I pull a player's profile, I then use their hash from that profile to then grab the skill tree that is associated with this player hash. Grab the backpack that is associated with this player's hash, and I add those tables or append those tables to my ultimate model, which ultimately gives me the full player model that we have. Now, when you're designing databases, you don't want to have redundant data being passed amongst tables that make up a big. We're going to talk about this in a weird way. And I mean, I'm going to stick with the Java object-oriented programming and referencing this to relational databases. So just bear with me if I get this kind of backwards here, but if you were to think of a package in Java, and the fact that that package may contain a few different things, like let's say player.java, player backpack.java, player collection log.java. They had a bunch of different things that made up what that package or what that player was or is. Those individual classes are basically tables in a database. And so ignore the methods, but the information, the raw data that's in that is going to be the data that's in that table that makes up. I really hope I'm not confusing anybody with this. If you want me to put together an actual video with some actual demonstrations, let me know and I'll put something together. But basically, if you want to think of it as every plain old Java object is a table, and you're storing the raw data from that into it. But now if you had, so like when I say the raw data, I'm talking like strings, booleans, integers, longs, bytes, shorts, raw data, primitives, or not primitive, well, you could use primitives, you could use the objects, but either way, when it comes to, say, putting in a custom Java object, like a custom class, you're going to need to make a back reference to that, because it is going to be, again, a different table, and you will need a way to reference that table to this table, which sometimes will be the object identifier, sometimes will be a key identifier. Like I use hash for my players here. I'm using a hash that acts as the key that is the unique thing amongst all tables that allows me to find all the pieces of the puzzle to make up the big picture. And wow, that got off topic. So jumping back into here, we've got to take this service, which takes care of saving the database, takes care of taking in a model and getting a data transfer, as well as takes care of finding them by name, finding them by item ID listing, finding them by timestamp. These are all the ways that these are all the ways that our program is going to service our users. Now, this or all of these classes are basically the trade post service. So these are going to be inside of the economy. Inside of our economy service, we're going to have to make a I think we'll get rid of the economy tab, and we're just going to have trade post, trade TP post. Naming is hard, but essentially this is going to be the trade post. Now I have ideas in my head about adding in things in the future, like an auction house, so that players can not only just say I want to sell this item for this price and stick it in the trade post and wait for the sale. I want to also be able to make it so that people can like put in stick in a whatever the hell they got, a cipher bidder, and say that they want this is what they'll take as the offer, but then allow people to bid and outbid people and like sort of like an auction house, which is something that I'm building later on. It's going to be post-release, but it's right now trade post. Yeah, we're not. I can't think of anything better to call this, guys. Like, don't hate me. And then in here we would make our controllers, controller services, data. And now this is where we're gonna start dropping some of this information in. So where did I put that? All right, so the back end service here, we're gonna come in and so offline sale. This one we're gonna take into data. We're going to make another package inside data called uncached. And this is just going to basically be the bits of data that we're going to be storing that we're not going to be caching to a database. So the data transfer objects, basically. Now if we bring up here, and we want to go into taking these of data, this is going to be the trade post listing and the repository. And I'm changing this from data to getter and setter. The reason I'm doing this for getter and setter is that, yes, I could be convenient and use one line and just say data. However, that data annotation generates getters, setters, toString, toHash, and I believe the two equals. So it generates a whole lot more than just getters and setters. I don't necessarily want my toString method to be whatever it is that is overridden by Lombok. So I'm perfectly fine with the straight out of the box listing from right out of the box. So we have this. We have trade post listing, which you'll see these little arrows. These just mean that they correspond and they connect with here. We have the repository, which is not being used at the moment. We can dip into our trade post service, which we'll copy and paste into trade post service. Add this, come up here, we're going to clean up this, and then we will import and import. So there it cleans up the imports for the service layer. Now, I am going to come up here and I'm going to tag on required args constructor. And the reason I'm going to tag on this required args is so that we can auto wire this without having to call in our actual constructor or create a constructor. Because Lombok will take care of generating a constructor that is needed. So by default, when we say something is final, then it's going to know that it is needed. And we're actually going to make this private because this trade posting repository is only ever used inside of here. It's not used outside, so there's no point in us transforming that. And just for the sake of getting this up to snuff with Java 21, what did I just do there? Now, you don't always have to I like having these vars in here, variables, because it makes it easier later on if I want to change something. It also, I think, personally, it makes it, or helps make it, a little more readable when you're assigning such things like this. I find personally that makes it a little more readable to go through. And now, for those of you with the AI support, you can even be all fancy and ask your AI to write your documentation. So, now that we have a service class, repository, we have objects, we have data objects, we need a controller. So, we're going to jump back into here and we're going to look for that trade post controller. This trade post controller, we're going to copy, drop it into here. I'm just going to straight up call this trade post controller, paste it in. Okay. We're going to clean up a couple of things here first and foremost, and then we are going to take care of the, yeah, okay. All right. So now where this almost looks good, we are going to change up a few things just so that it meets my standards. And I say my standards because technically this is being done under Collab Studios, which is my company. And generally when you're writing code for somebody or for a team or whatever, you're writing it for that company's standards. Every company has their own standards. Every company has their own differences. I just so happen to have sort of a standard that I go with now, and it's changed over the years, but it's something that is always ever growing. Uh, Best practice that I do is I usually annotate my request mappings with with API, if it's an API, obviously. And then I usually have V1 or a version 1, depending on the version of the controller. This is so that we can keep existing systems running and active um, while upgrading and advancing systems. So you'll often see this done in things like in any kind of instance where companies have a legacy program. Like, for example, let's say you're using um, Microsoft's web app for the OneDrive or whatever, and they're looking to redesign it and do something with it. They're gonna make a version 2 of it, but they're still gonna keep that version 1 up and running so that for people who are already familiar with said existing service can still continue to use said existing service as they are, and it will become deprecated over time, which just means that it will be marked for deletion at a future date. Um, so generally, it's best practice to keep, if it isn't a RESTful API, then you want to have it as an API as the first part, followed by the version number, followed by generally something about what this is. So in our case, this is going to be economy, market, and then trade post. Now the reason I'm doing it like that is because I'm going to have multiple sort of economic tools in the API, the whatever um, economy pool. There will be this one is just so happens to be for the market of the game, and it happens to be the trade post. So thus we are listing this here as market and trade post. Now, things that we are going to change is if we wanted to get an item from this from the trade post. This is sort of good, but we want to be able to make a get request here, pass in an ID, and then just simply maybe say item, so that we know that we're getting a specific item from there. So now that one looks good. And if we're searching now for a player, then pretty much we're looking to do something similar. We want to be able to say, okay, API v1 market trade post glab a / player, and have it return the list of the trade post list, or the trade post listing for the said player. Now, if we're looking to add one, then I think I'm just going to say add, or no, we're just going to make a post request. Let's do this. So, yeah, they'll come here, trade post. Make a post request to the trade post, which is just going to go ahead and add. If we receive any kind of post request, it's going to be here to add. If we receive if we receive a put request, then we're going to know that we're modifying it. And of course, if we get a delete mapping, then we know we're going to be removing said list. So now this just allows us to clean this up and make it look a lot better. Because now if you're running through this here at first, and you're taking a look at this, you can see just based on the maps that here we're getting an item, here we're getting a list by player, or the trade post by player, and here we can see, okay, we're posting one, so we're adding it, it's new. Here we see putting, so we already have an existing one, we're modifying it, and we're putting it away on the shelf. And again, if we have a delete request, then we know that, okay, we're deleting something here. So we go through and handle that appropriately. Now, just taking a look to see what it is that I have coming on here, or going on here. So we are going to be passing in an API with each of our actions, like our post, put, and delete. I'm not sure why this. God, I feel like I should be redoing this completely. Okay. So we're gonna redo some of this code because, quite frankly, it's a little horrendous. All right, let's refactor this a little bit. So first off, if we don't have the key, then it's unauthorized. If the listing, the passing is null, then it's just not acceptable. Otherwise, we are going to save. Why is it not letting me save and flush? Because it's a CRUD repository. Okay. So we're making a quick change to this so it is a JPA repository because I want to be able to make a few things here. So when we save this, I want to be able to save and flush. And I'm actually going to return that object. And this is going to be a straight up listing. So now if we jump back to the save where we're saving it, I'm just going to say this here is a cached version of the save so that, well, right here we're printing out the listing. We don't have to, so I'm actually going to get rid of that. That wasn't needed at all. So here we're going to save and flush and essentially get us back the exact same listing that we just made. And so long as this here does not equal null, we're going to say that it was successfully saved in the database. And then that was when we say it was returned created. So now this is taking the listing DTO here, and if the API that we're going to say unauthorized, if the listing was null, then there's nothing in the post, so it's just going to say unauthorized. Our listing trading post, we're going to find this by the timestamp here. And of course, if it's not null, if we found it, then we're going to call the service to save. But we're not going to actually call save. We're going to come in here and we're going to call update. So this is creating a new one, which is going to essentially give it a new identifier. So this is us updating this. This is the updated listing. So I'm actually going to rename this to updated listing. Sure, yeah. So I'm going to try to find the listing based on here and copy, paste, update. And create this method here. Paste. Okay, so now I just want to make sure, since we're updating this, we are taking the listing and setting the username to that of the username, offer per unit, offered item, value, and timestamp for all being put there. So then we're just going to call on the trade repository dot save listing. All right, so now we're saving that to the listing, and once we save that to the database, we're coming in here, updating it, saying it was saved. I successfully updated database. And just to be absolutely certain on that, I'm actually going to do a save flush, and we're going to make that come back with a listing, because I want to come back into here and I want to say that this is a variable updated. Do that, so that I can come into here and know for sure that things are updated. So now that will respond back with the updated ID. and everything is good. So modifying it just got that easy. All right, so next we're going to take a look at the delete method. Because we're passing in a request header, which is the listing ID. So basically, if our API is invalid, then unauthorized. If our listing ID is not there, clearly there was nothing sent in the body. We're just actually going to leave this as a null, and I'm just going to say not found. Otherwise, we're going to go looking for this here, and if it exists, we're going to go ahead and say that it was. We're going to go ahead and delete it. So we're going to go ahead and say if the trade post listing or the listing is not null, then go into the service and delete this listing. Technically speaking, I'm just going to pass in a listing identifier. Yeah, find it by. Okay, find this by timestamp, and we're looking for the listing identifier. Okay. Um, okay. So if we make a delete, um, if we make a delete request, then we're going to go ahead and go into there and delete it. Other than that, we can make a way to search for. Well, we're just going to make this /all, um, so that we're just going to the simple trade post /all for all of these, get all for all of those, get ID, and /item or get name /player, and those will return the player or the item. Then from there, if we make just a straight up post request, then we're adding an item. If we make a put request, then we have an item, we're updating it. If we make a delete request, then, well, we just want to delete it. And if we make I'm actually, for the sake of this, sake of keeping things the same, I'm going to drop all the gets up top. So all of the get methods are up top, and then our actual sort of CRUD requests are down bottom. So we can make a post to put, make a post to add a new one, make a put to put away one that we have, and make a delete so that we can delete a record. So we have that. Our trade post service is okay. Everything in here is fine. We have changed this to the JPA as opposed to the CRUD, just so that we can have some additional functionality. Now, some people may argue that I should put this as an optional, but I mean, yeah, you know what? Let's wrap that in an optional. There's no harm in that. There is no harm in that. Yeah. So now that's just simply going to return it or null. Either way, just it's an optional. And the trade, so that takes care of our trading post. So far we've added the economy trading post service. We've taken care of Discord and adding in our form model and a button handler. Next, let's take a look and see what we got in a line of next. Because right now, I believe we're almost done with the back end. Close that. However, this does mean we have another service now, actually. That's kind of exciting, too. So let's go up into our Discord. We'll copy this one because it was our last. So, copy, paste, and yep, add it. This is going to be 8. Don't have that. Yes, I believe, have a token. There it is. So there's our API key taken care of. Logging, debug mode, okay, good. Alright, so now the only thing left to do is go into trade post, new Java class, and we're going to make this trade post services. We're going to come into here, add it to our Git. We're going to come up here. We're going to annotate this with a Spring Boot application. We're going to come down here, make a public static void main. And in here, we're just going to tell it Spring application dot run, pass in the name of our application, which is this, pass in the arguments, and done. So there is our trade post service now good. If we run this, you'll see that we're going to get another trade post service here. That'll pop up. And once she turns on, she'll be on 8088. Nope, because there is a issue. String could not be found. Huh? Trade post controller. Now we have our website on 80. We've got 80, 81, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and now 8. So, so now we have 9 services running inside of our Boneyard backend that make up our network. So this is, we've now implemented trading post controller, the Discord controller for handling form models. So we now have our way of handling, so that our players in game can send a message to Discord in a way that Discord can reply back. We have a way that our trading post is now in there. The next bunch of stuff that we need to rip out of our back end. I want to say it's just the NPC spawns and the individual items. Did we touch on the item controller and the item def controller? We did. Okay, so we already have the item services. All right, so we have the item services. I'm gonna need the NPC spawns and combat. So we're gonna have some NPC services that are gonna be needed. NPCs, spawns, combat, spawn, combat, spawn. Alright. So it looks like our next mission is to pull over the NPC services so that we can have a way to get our NPC spawns, set our NPC spawns, set up some combat details, and whatnot. Once we have all this done, we're then going to be looking at going back over to the. We're then going to be looking at, and I'm going to try to end this now because of the fact that it's roughly at the 2-hour mark. So we're going to go ahead and sort of call it for the day for this. Or at least not for the day, but call it for now. I might come back a little later on and do another stream. I'm not 100% on that yet. However, so where we're leaving it today, or leaving it now, the next thing that we're going to be doing on our next stream is pulling over the NPC service so that we can take advantage of NPC spawns, NPC combat scripts, and I'm not 100% sure if I want to tack the stores in there or not. They are NPC related, but at the same time, they're not. Like, I don't know. I might make my own. I might make a tent service for the stores, and just to make that a little bit easier, so that way that I can edit my stores in a web app and all my information in a web app. That way it's easier because ultimately I want it so that myself and my team can go to our web app and view all sorts of information and administrative data, like the stores, the items in our database. I want to be able to check out the players that are in the database. I want to be able to um, edit edit some stores on the fly, edit some NPC combat data. I want to be able to take care of all that administrative host work from the back end, from the web app, and so that when my game server or the world turns on, it's going to make a request to the back end, more or less to update the individual. And this is why I want to get it to Java 21, because I want to take advantage of structured concurrent threads, so that way I can, when the world logs in and makes a request, I want it to more or less spin up a whole bunch of different threads and fire them at the back end with all the different data, looking for an updated, looking for the update. Ultimately, my back end is going to make or compress the database files into little SQL-like files, and I want to be able to send a request from my game server, um, and say, hey, this is my local store's CRC tables. Um, Pass that to the back end and make the request of, you know, is there any difference? So I'm going to make a post request that's going to contain a CRC records, or like identifiable redundant numbers. Um, CRC tables are basically just a um, continuous redundancy cycle, I think is what it's called. I'm not sure. I forget. But basically, I forget what the exact acronym stands for off the top of my head. But it basically is a way that you can uh, send some data and be like, all right, this is the compressed, like hashed up versions of my database files, or my files, and it's going to do the same algorithm to generate the CRC tables on the game server as it will on the client, on the web server, so that way my backend can make a CRC record of its own shops, and then say, okay, yeah, they're the same, you're good. Otherwise, say, no, 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 backend is different. There was a change made. Here, take these, and then stream the latest database files to my game server, so that my game servers all stay up to date, and I only ever have to update one single spot. Because that's what I'm trying to burn down, is all the loose ends, or all the other areas that can go wrong. If you've stuck it with me throughout this video, thank you. I appreciate your time. If you've stuck it out with me for this series so far, then an even bigger congratulations and thank you for your time. This has been a lot of fun to do. I am going to be continuing to do this. I'm having a lot of fun. I might even continue this after my monolithic breakdown. Let's call it what it is. So if you want me to keep doing these videos even after I break down the monolith, and just like continue picking at the private servers and like streaming just code, let me know. I'm really enjoying it. Other than that, it's been a blast. If you haven't subscribed already, please hit that subscribe button, get notified when I go live. We will be going live again tomorrow at the latest, but I may be going live a little later on this evening. My normal time was always 5 o'clock my time, which would be 4 o'clock Eastern. But I've been kind of enjoying these early mornings. If you happen to think this is a better time, let me know. If you think that the 4 o'clock Eastern is a better time, let me know. Or if you want to suggest another time, let me know. I'm completely open. Anyway, it's been great. Thank you for your time. Thanks for chilling with me. It's been good having this coffee and code session. I'm really enjoying these. I really do. If you happen to want to get involved, by all means, jump in the live stream, get involved with the chat, jump on Discord. I've got a small community growing there right now. If you want to join up with the Discord of the actual game that we're kind of picking at, let me know. I'll get you a link to that as well. Otherwise, keep your coffee cup full, keep your curiosity open, and keep your skills sharp.